So, welcome to Moments That Could Have Changed Football Forever. My name is Peter Thornton, and I co-authored the book of that name with my great friend and coaching guru, Peter Prickett, who's here today.
Hi, everyone.
And we have with us on this podcast another coaching guru, the great man himself, founding father of Sunday Share, Mr. Lee Cosgrove. So, Lee, before we get into what if moments, just give us a quick insight into the Sunday Share.
Okay, well, thanks both Peters for asking me to come on. I won't go into the full history of it, but I think we're now flying towards the third anniversary, maybe January if I get my dates right. So I think we're up to 13,000 followers. So it keeps going. People keep joining us. Some may leave us. So still going strong, still seeing some people there week in, week out, always sharing stuff.
And the key driver of this, Lee, is that the content is free, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I mean, yeah. The idea is I've said all along, we're not trying to become the site that got thousands of followers. People do it. Everything is free. There's obviously companies on there that have tried to come in and kind of sell stuff. I've said to them, listen, you've got to give us some free. You've got to give the coaches some free stuff first. Then you can lead them there. But it's not a selling site. And we people who look after the Sunday Share, we look after them. We try and retweet them and help them out. But generally, it's all free stuff, and it ranges from pro license down to your novice type stuff. But yeah, all free stuff, and the biggest, widest range that's useful for, I would say, any coach really, other than probably Premier League professional coach. So there's something in there for everybody.
Yeah. There's something for everyone, isn't there? That's what makes it so special.
Yeah.
So you're on the show. Your what if moment that you wanted to talk about. What if an African team won the World Cup? And we're going to start in 1990 then.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Well, we were talking before about, I think everybody of a certain age, older, shall we say, they have a certain World Cup that resonates with them. And sometimes it's where that place is held for timings of the game, what age you were, whether you were down the pub with your mates or single or all loads of different things. But everybody's got their favourite World Cup. Some of it's from memories like, my first one I can remember really was the 78 Argentina one with the ticker tape and watching that. Mario Kempes was the one I can remember with the hair, but the Dutch team, I've just been reading the book on the Dutch team with all them Dutch names. So that's my vivid memories of a child watching it, but an adult.
Were you allowed to stay up then, Lee, to watch it as a kid? Because it was always on late, wasn't it?
Yeah, I can't remember the ins and outs of it. Maybe it was just that we watched it, and whether that was highlights or games. But
all right, yeah.
I remember just from 78, I remember having a massive game. It was 30-a-side at school, and you just pick whether you were Argentina or Holland. So I remember that.
Brilliant.
And Holland were really unlucky with that final. I think it was a torrid final for the Dutch. I think all sorts of shenanigans were going on.
Yeah.
But just a ticket, and hearing the names, them certain names, and we'll talk about, some of the African names. It's the names that resonate with you. And I've posted stuff before where the older kids would be Kempes and Nayskins and Johnny Rep. Johnny Rep, everybody seemed to be wanting to be Johnny Rep.
Yeah.
So that was my young one. But then the 1990 came, and obviously England doing very well. We'll talk about England. And but yeah, that was really my first time of noticing an African team making waves and upsetting people in that World Cup. It was, I think the Cameroon team were amateur. I think it was a very amateur setup that they were doing. So I think they kind of shook the world a little bit with that World Cup in getting as far as they did.
I think it was Roger Miller, Peter, would you say? He was the first African star?
I think he's the first one to really capture the imagination. They had some big players before. there have been shocks from African teams before that. We had West Algeria beating West Germany at one of the World Cups. But that doesn't seem to have captured the imagination in the same way that Cameroon did.
Yeah, it was. I think for me, it boiled down to that very first game, didn't it? You know, Argentina versus Cameroon, and everyone thought, well, it'll just be a cricket score, and it wasn't, was it? It just wasn't.
No, I mean I think that was the because I think then it was the Argentina were the holders, so the holders played the first game. It was the very first game, wasn't it? I think is it different now to the I can't remember.
They changed it. I can't remember exactly when they changed it. I know definitely in 2006 Germany played the opening game of the tournament as hosts. 2002 I think France played the first game because they also lost. They to an El Hadji Diouf inspired team.
I think the other thing with that, the start of that World Cup, I mean, I know they weren't an African team, but Costa Rica beat Scotland, didn't they? And he just, that start was just madness, wasn't it? He was like, whoa, what's going on? You felt there was a new world order.
Yeah, I think because it was all coming into your living rooms, it was like front and centre. It was like, and like you say, Peter, the first game, you know, everybody's on it. And Argentina, I mean, like you said, everybody was just predicting this was going to be a cricket score. The Cameroon I think they were in all sorts of trouble before they got there, and I think were they arguing with their own FA over money and stuff like that and facilities. I mean, they just came as like the whipping boys, didn't they? The mighty Argentina and Maradona. And I mean, I was saying I've kind of watched some highlights of that game. There's a documentary on that, and I mean some of the tackles on there. I think Maradona took one at like shoulder height to his stood in it. Is it Caniggia? Claudio Caniggia. I mean, I think they described it as a karate kick. I think two of them jumped in and missed him, and then one of them just cleared him out, and they were just, I mean, and then to go and score and win the game just like shook the world, didn't it? It literally shook. I mean, it wasn't the best of goals. I think the Argentina keeper will never forget that for the goal, because it was a bit of a header, soft heading, let it go under his knees and pushed it in his goal. But I think that game shook the world. But even at that stage, people just thought it was a one-off. It was because Argentina were good for that game, but just I think they thought it was a one-off. Nervous.
The great thing was they managed to get through to the knockout stage, wasn't it? It wasn't like a big fluke. You know, they got through, didn't they? Which was,
and they got through comfortably because they won the second game as well. They took the last game off.
Yes,
they got beat 4-0.
4-0 defeat to Russia.
Yeah, they topped the group, didn't they? So, yeah, my point being, Peter, that I think when you watch that game, you just thought this is just Argentina have been caught cold. They've underestimated the African team, and you know the order will be back in once they settle it. But they won the group. Topped the group, and went through. So they were then had to be taken seriously. You know, that was, and then when it came that we had to say, because they play in England, so we had to take them seriously. And,
well, I was just about to get onto that, because I can remember we'd had those shots and shocks, you know, and then we'd beaten Belgium, and you thought, oh, hello, you know, what's happening here with that brilliant goal from Platty, wasn't it? The over-the-shoulder volley, that brilliant goal. But Peter, can you remember that sort of momentum for England? And the dilemma for me was, you knew Cameroon were quite a good side, didn't you, by the time we got to that point?
I was 9, and this was my first real venture into a football World Cup. I don't remember 86. I don't remember Euro 88 particularly. Even the Van Basten goal is something that I came across later. So this is my first real tournament, and for me, I knew that we got through. I remember the David Platt volley.
Yeah.
And as a 9-year-old, naive 9-year-old, I'm like, who are this? We're through to the next round. No problem. Yeah. Obviously, that's not quite how it. I mean, we did get through, but it was no cruise by any means.
No, I have to say, I think there were people peeping up from behind the settee, weren't they, during the 3-2? I mean, it was tight, wasn't it, Lee?
The Cameroon one, yeah. I mean, just going back to the Belgium one. This is because obviously I was older, Peter, so we were kind of down the pub. Listen, I remember, this is no word of a lie. People were putting 1966 like 50p's on top of the TV as like good luck. And like it was like this was the Belgium game, so there were people saying we're going to win this, and then funnily enough, I missed the Platt goal because we'd gone outside because we all thought it was going to go to extra time. It went to extra time, didn't it? We thought it was going to go to penalties. That was it. So we'd all gone outside for a breather because it was obviously the summer, and then it was going to go to penalties, and then suddenly it was we were all outside picking who's going to be our penalty taker, and then suddenly, it's Platt scored it, and the place went absolutely mental. Yeah. I remember there was 2 pubs where I used to live, the New Inn and the Old Manor Inn, and I think we all did a conga from the New Inn because the Old Manor had tables outside, so we were dancing on the tables outside. That was after the Belgium game. And
just to let people know who don't know Lee very well, he's from Leicester, so congas round pubs is sort of standard in that part of the world, isn't it?
It was then, and like Peter's just said, we kind of got carried away with it all. It was all, this is it, we're going to win it. It's unlike English people to get carried away with football, isn't it? This was going to be our year. And Cameroon were just a sideshow. They were only an African team. Yeah. They can't play football like we are. We invented the game, so this will be a straightforward game. Well, and then we're already looking who we're going to face in the semi-final. And like you've just said, Peter, it didn't turn out to be like that. And they nearly did it. I mean, England were poor in that game, really. And I think it was 2. And talking of Leicester's finest, Gary Lineker, I think he took 2 tumbles to the ground for 2 penalties. And
there's a great story, isn't there, where someone asked him, what was it like knowing that you got the weight of the World Cup and the nation on your shoulders as you stepped up to take that penalty? And he said, I could just hear my brother, what he would have said if I'd have missed.
Right. Okay, you can't.
Yeah, that's what he said.
Yeah, I mean, Cameroon was so unlucky that game. I think Lineker scored quite late on. To equalise. They were nearly there and doing it. Cameroon, England got out by the skin of the teeth in that one, and I think it was an extra time penalty that seen us through to the semi-final. So,
as a 9-year-old, Pete, were you allowed to stay out and watch then?
I was, I was allowed to stay up, and then in '94 for the next World Cup, I tried to stay up to watch the games that were at 2 a.m. And after 2 attempts where I fell asleep both times, I decided it was time for the old VHS for that tournament.
Mum, set the tape.
I absolutely set the tape myself. But yeah, I was allowed to stay up for those games.
USA was, I think, a funny World Cup.
Yeah,
because it was. We weren't there, were we? England weren't there, so you kind of it didn't seem quite right. Was it the Graham Taylor days, weren't it? Was it Graham Taylor that we didn't get there? So, no.
Yes, Taylor was in charge for the qualifying.
Yeah, that was the old the free kick, weren't it, and the penalty, and everybody not getting sent off. So, but '94 was you still watched it, but it was American times, like Peter was saying. So they were there, and you kind of watched the games, but still a great World Cup. I think that's still a great World Cup in 1994. So yeah, just going to your point, so Cameroon could have easily gone on and maybe done better. I mean, they could have easily made that semi-final in 1990 quite easily. It was a spin of a coin, really.
Were Cameroon there in '94, Peter, or no?
They were. They infamously We said they got, say infamously, they got beaten 4-0 after having qualified in the group by Russia, by the USSR. But at 94, they play Russia and Selenko nets 5 against them as they lose 6-1.
Yeah, that's the one.
So, yeah, an interesting little quirk there that they played them again the next tournament and got thrashed by them again.
But the what if is, what if an African nation wins the World Cup? And in the book, Peter, Nigeria is the story, isn't it?
They're the ones I go for. So it is 1994 where they're the African team that I go for first. Maybe it's the Englishman in me saying that no, I'm not. Cameroon do not beat England to get through, but Nigeria were so close, so well organized, and had a great mix because they had the flair as well. And it's just they are beaten by Italy by a rebound from a tackle that drops to Baggio, who equalizes right at the end of the game. Right at the end of that game. That ball bounces differently. The whole premise of our what if there, one bounce of a ball bounces differently. Nigeria have beaten Italy 1-0, and Italy went all the way to the final and were only beaten on penalties. So that's it. Even though Cameroon went around further, that's why I picked Nigeria out as the team to go on and win the World Cup.
Because you could see him along that pathway, couldn't you? You take Italy out of that and see where they would have gone. It looked very feasible, didn't it?
The measure of their talent is that 2 years later, at the Olympics, they beat both Brazil and Argentina to win that tournament. And that's a Brazil team with original Ronaldo R9 in it. So that's a measure of where Nigeria were at that time.
Yeah, I mean, Nigeria had some great players in that team, didn't they?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, Amakachi and Okocha are probably the big two that we think of because they played in England. You have players like Rashid Yekini and Sunday Elise in there as well. So they're, and Finidi George, who in 94 had won the European Cup, the Champions League right. 95, a year later, won the Champions League with Ajax.
Yeah. So at this point, Lee, are you late 20s for this World Cup? Right into the football, still playing?
Yeah, I am at that stage. My question was, or my point at that point was, I think Cameroon in 1990, we're not going backwards here, but Cameroon 1990 came as an amateur team. They had a 42-year-old striker who'd 2 years previously had retired, and I think he'd had like a game, what do they call it, a testimonial for him 2 years earlier. So, I mean, how can you seriously think you're going to win the World Cup with a 42-year-old striker? Do then Nigeria look at what Cameroon done and said, you know what, if we can sort ourselves out here and be that more professional and be that better, this is something that an African team can do well. If Cameroon can do it in 1990 as kind of amateurs with a 42-year-old semi-retired striker, then that must have been a great leap of 4 years into I've lost me years now. 94. 94. Yeah, I was obviously 26, still into my football then. Probably playing. I was playing at that stage, and yeah, with England not being there, I think we can't. You can kind of relax a little bit, like Peter says. I think you get wrapped up with the English thing. We can win it. You don't start watching really the other teams, or you're nervous if you look at other teams to see if they're doing well. But yeah, I mean, at that stage, the African teams aren't really on our radar, so we're not taking them quite seriously yet, are we? Because you've got your Brazilian, it's Brazil, Germany. We always put England in there, but we weren't there. So this is where you've still got the surprise element with an African team, but they've now got the players, they've got the technique, and I mean, I think Cameroon were very physical in 1919, kicked teams off the park. but improved as it went on. But some of the players that Nigeria had in '94, they were real.
JJ, isn't it? JJ, everyone remembers JJ.
Yeah.
What a player.
I mean, he must be an icon for many player that came after him. I think with him, no disrespect to Bolton, I think that kind of took a bit of his magic away, if you know what I mean, because he'd gone. It was a bit of a left field move, wasn't it, to go to Bolton? Yeah. But he could play. I mean, if you think back then of what the pitches were like, it's a few years, 30 years ago now, but the pitches weren't the best then. But he was a magician, and I think Nigeria suddenly got more professional, and like Peter says, they could have easily gone on to win that tournament. I don't think Cameroon were ever going to win it, but Nigeria, if that didn't happen and got past Italy, I mean, getting past the Italians is no mean feat, isn't it? You knock them out, you're going to be somewhere near the end of the tournament, especially in them years.
So Nigeria possibly winning the 1994 World Cup. That seems to be a good place for us to stop for half time.
What if Brian Clough had managed England?
What if Ronaldo and Messi had played together?
What if Pep Guardiola managed in League Two?
These are just some of the things discussed in a brand new book, Moments That Could Have Changed Football Forever. Every what if moment in the book has been chosen to spark debate. Buy your copy now online at Amazon or Waterstones.
Welcome back to Moments That Could Have Changed Football Forever. Before the break, myself, Peter Thornton, Peter Prickett and top coach Lee Cosgrove were discussing what if an African nation won the World Cup. What do we think needs to happen for Africa to do that, Peter?
Morocco obviously give us a little bit of a blueprint. They came very, very close in reaching the semi-final 2022. Playing slightly differently. We know they didn't have a lot of possession. They had a lot of technical players, but they played on the break. What needs to happen? Really difficult, because what needs to happen for any team to win the World Cup?
Yeah.
I mean,
I think that's the point, isn't it? It isn't like Lee made a really good point in the first half that, Cameroon turned up and it was pretty amateurish, 42-year-old centre forward. But now the African nations are as professional as you see. And, Morocco were terrific, weren't they?
Yeah, but there is this element, because it's become a global game, that it becomes a little bit homogenous, and the identities between the nations are less obvious. But there are positives and minuses against that. But the positive is that even teams who years ago we would have thought, well, they don't know what they're doing, they haven't got a set up, blah blah blah. Well, they have now. Yeah. They can all organize themselves. They just may not have the talent. And perhaps the big turning point that may have occurred earlier, if Cameroon had won or Nigeria had won, the talent may not have gone and played for the Dutch, for Belgium, for France. They may have played for their African nation of birth or the nation of their parents. Patrick Vieira may never have played for France. He may have played for Senegal. You had him into the 2002 team. They may have gone even further. So that may be what needs to happen. Even now, less of the African players playing for France than playing, and then go and play for the African nation.
Senegal was a team you remembered, Lee.
I think they started to get, that was 2002. I think they got to the quarterfinals. Yeah. I mean, Nigeria again got to the quarterfinal, last 16 again in '98. I think they started to become more technical players.
Yeah.
The growth of, the Cameroon were really big chaps, but no great technicians as such. Then we got JJ in '94. They started to become great technicians, and learning how to play the game. I don't mean that disrespectively, but how to play tournament football, and they became technical players. I think these were the days of England falling behind, resting on our laurels, thinking we were okay. We'd invented the game, so we don't need to do too much. And I think we got bypassed, certainly technically, by the African teams.
Yeah.
And the African players. I mean, that's some they all could play. They were all good technicians right through from the back. Whereas I think with British English football, or British, we've kind of started with the forwards and the midfield, and now we're working on centre backs and full backs. We've kind of got there now, but these African teams in the 90s were becoming all great technicians. It was just, could they put it all together, win games of football, and then could they win tournaments? I don't really know where. I think having a World Cup, so South Africa getting it in 2010, I think that might have been the point where I don't think South Africa was strong enough to win it, were they? As a nation to win it.
No.
But maybe that was the year. If it was going to be 1 year with home advantage, it was continent South Africa. And
it's almost like that was the red herring for the African teams, wasn't it? Oh, right, it's in South Africa. Oh, they must have a better chance, and they didn't seem to have.
No.
Did they?
Well,
Ghana
were the ones that year.
Yeah.
With
Ghana were the ones that had a run.
The infamous combination of ruthlessness and cheating that seems to occur with some South American teams. Suarez did what it took. He handballed it on the line. They missed the penalty. Out go Ghana in the shootout.
Sorry, Peter.
Go on.
I think you have to. That is one of. There's millions of them, but there's one of many defining football moments with Suarez watching that penalty
That
get
is
set
one, isn't it? That is
in the tunnel. I mean, the fact he was allowed to stay in the tunnel at a World Cup, because normally they're banished to the changing rooms. But that moment there, and I think then there was a change of heart around the world for African teams, because they must have felt sorry for Ghana, because they were robbed, weren't they? Really by
what if he doesn't? What if he doesn't handball it? It's surreal, isn't it?
Well, if he doesn't handball it, it's in the net, and they're through. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, and I have to say, Suarez takes a lot of stick for that, but I don't know anyone I ever played with that wouldn't have done the same.
Yeah, I'd have done it.
Yeah, it worked. It worked.
Yeah,
and he took
You're
the
there
risk.
to win, aren't you?
He must have took a red card for that.
He did. Yeah. It was like I'd compare it to the Ballack challenge in 2002, where the South Korean player is South Korean is clean through on goal. Ballack's chasing him. He brings him down outside the box. He's sent off. Germany just have to defend a free kick, which they see off easily, and they're into the final.
Yeah. It's another moment, isn't it?
Are we going to say at this point then that Ghana missed the best opportunity?
Well, certainly. I mean, as Peter was hinting at earlier, they sort of go cold, don't they? Right up to Morocco. Morocco's probably the next one you remember, isn't it? Yeah,
I mean, like I say, Nigeria is very close with that. The Italy game, especially with Zola had got sent off. I don't really said that. Zola got sent off, so that was pretty close to then getting close to win it.
Ghana may be the most unfortunate. I don't know if they were close. You could really make a case for them winning that tournament.
No,
who did they play afterwards?
Pardon?
Who did they play afterwards? Ghana.
Who did Uruguay play after?
Oh yeah, Uruguay.
Didn't England play them? Didn't we lose to them?
Not in the semi-final. They lost to the Dutch in the semi-final.
Right, there you go. Yeah,
and then lost to Germany in the third place.
Big fault to say Ghana were going to win it then, but you see, what I find interesting is if you think about the big footballing nations, the big European nations, they always have the steady, stream of players coming through. Same with the big South American nations, Argentina, Brazil. They always have a, conveyor belt of talent coming through. Are we going to see that with an African nation, or is it going to be one of those outliers where, I always say, like class of '92 at United, where you get a group together that just by accident of birth are all good at the same time, and that's how an African nation wins it?
Well, I've got the table that we put in the book, which is the French squad from 2018, and I'm going to just read the players and who they could have played for. Mm-hmm. So Kylian Mbappe could have played, instead of for France, for Algeria or Cameroon. Paul Pogba could have played for Guinea. Samuel Umtiti could have played for Cameroon. Steve Mandanda could have played for Congo. Blaise Matuidi could have played for Congo. N'Golo Kante could have played for Mali. Ousmane Dembele could also have played for Mali. Benjamin Mendy, Djibril Sidibe, and Presnel Kimpembe could all have played for Congo. Nabil Fekir could have played for Algeria, and Adil Rami could have played for Morocco. So Congo could have had a whole new back line with Mandanda in goal, Mendy, Sidibe, and Kimpembe, with Matuidi in front.
There you go. See, I think, my point of view, I think that's how they do it. I think it is a cluster of players who all come through at the same time. It's almost like the big wave in Papillon, innit? You're just waiting for that big moment that comes. And then they, that cluster of players, they've got the professionalism now, they've got the coaches behind them. And as we pointed out in the book, for once, they get the rub of the green, they get the bounce of the ball in a crucial time, and they do go on and win it. That's how I see an African nation doing it. Are you with that, Lee, or are you?
Yeah, I think when we're going back to like the Nigeria and the Cameroon sort of time, surely some of it's got to be a financial thing, because South America, although they're a greater wealth of nations, shall we say, than what Africa is. So those players will still play for South American teams until the big money starts knocking from Portugal and Spain and stuff like that. So they're going to there, but maybe Africa at that stage hasn't got the finances, so they get drawn up to the Frances and the European teams and those. It must be a financial thing that it makes sense for them to go and earn the money and and help their families. I know the South Americans do it.
You see, Lee, that is my point. I've chatted with my pals about it, and they were saying, the problem with the African nations is, their players, they all travel around the world, as you just pointed out, to get the best deals they can to get the money. I don't think that is an inhibitor. If you have a look, how many Argentinians still play in Argentina? How many Brazilians still play in Brazil? That isn't going to stop you winning a World Cup, is it?
Do they the fact that they've gone to the African players have gone to Europe, that they've then get I don't know what, not made to play, but they then got into their nations that Peter just pointed out played for. Is that part of it? And then they kind of, I know we do it with England and Wales and Scotland and all that sort of stuff here, but that's a lot of people seem to have switched allegiances.
Some of it's second generation, but some of it is where they have just come to another nation at a very young age. The Sadio Mane documentary shows that he comes to Europe as a 14, 15-year-old, very, very young, and they come because that's their route to becoming a professional.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there's quite a lot of controversy out there, and I hope it gets dealt with. There are people conning young African players, young teenagers, by essentially posing as agents, receiving fees, and then there's nothing at the end of it. But that shows that the allure of a career in Europe is there.
Did Mane?
Sorry, I was going to say, I think it's an interesting point, isn't it? You know, does Mbappe, if Cameroon have won the World Cup and are an established World Cup nation who win a World Cup, go close a couple of times, a semi-final or something like that, does he choose Cameroon over France, do you think?
I think
Who knows?
I think that's the interesting thing is, you know, what we see in England, usually the pathway to the England team, you know, it's so difficult to get into the England team that a lot of lads with dual nationality then choose, like, I think Zaha has just gone and, you know, he's chosen an African nation to go and play with. A lot of them go back to the roots to get international football, don't they? Whereas I can see it being the other way round if an African nation has won it.
Well, I think Mbappe is so good, so young, he's probably not going to be the one. But Kante?
Yeah.
Kante's about, Lee, how old was Kante when he's in the Leicester team?
He was only young. He was only 24 or something. He wasn't that old. I think he was, yeah.
But he wasn't playing for France yet at that point. So at the age of 24, he could well have chosen Mali.
Right.
You see, I think one of the really interesting ones for me is nothing to do with Africa, but, you know, who a footballer chooses to represent. And I always go back to Ryan Giggs, you know, when you've got that choice, because he played for England schoolboys. He played for England because he was a schoolboy in England.
Yeah.
He moved to Swinton when his father started playing rugby league for Swinton. And they always asked him, you know, having played for England schoolboys, why did you choose Wales over England? And he said, because my gran would have killed me.
Yeah.
But that is a very similar sort of thing, you know, to the African guys, as you rightly said, Peter, with that list. You know, how do they choose which, as a footballer, how do you choose which nation to represent? What is best for your career? As you pointed out, Lee, you know, for the money, do you choose France, where I'm going to make a lot of money, or do I choose Cameroon? It's a real dilemma, isn't it?
Is it fame or fortune? Like you say, I think, Peter, if you said that an African nation finally won a World Cup, they will become national heroes. I mean, a lot of them have become national heroes for getting to quarterfinals and I think like you say, I think it's going to take. It's a chicken and the egg thing. It's chicken and egg. They need to win one to then become icons and heroes for then young kids to want to play and replicate what that great team did. And they've got to get one over the line, haven't they?
I think once you see someone else do it, and someone who you can relate to, you then go, we can do that too. And you know, in English academies, someone like Trent Alexander-Arnold playing for the Liverpool first team and captaining the team, that means that the other academies players go, he can do it, so can I. And it's a different sort of level, but an African team kind of needs to see another African team do it to go, well, we can do that too.
Yeah.
Then it's a sense of identity, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, I always say, if you know, I'm an Englishman. If England had been rubbish at football, I have got Irish ancestry. If Ireland had been brilliant at football, I could only have played for England. It's where you're from, isn't it?
Do you think? I always think that the English players haven't got that great desire, not desire, but the national team doesn't seem to me. I mean, you look at the Argentinians. I mean, it's everything, isn't it? For that.
Yeah.
You know, it means everything. I'm not sure whether we've got that in England, but I think the African teams and nations have got that love of that country that they must represent. So they have got that above us. I'm not quite sure we've got that in England. I think we've kind of we have improved and we've muddled our way to some close calls, but I don't see that pride. I'm not saying there's not pride, but I'm not seeing as much pride in that English name as like the Argentinians that show. But and the Africans, you know, they're proud to like play for their country more so than I would say English players. And then now they're getting the talent there, and I think it's that perfect moment. Like you said, Peter, they need to have probably 7 or 8 really top quality players that can carry that team to a final. And it's knockout tournament. It's knockout tournament, as Pep always says. It's anybody's game sometimes when it's a knockout on. So they need that rub of the green. And we've talked about Nigeria with that late bobble of the ball, and Ghana, the handball. It's just the stars just haven't quite aligned for them. And
I think what is interesting, I think now if you picked, you know, a continent 11 from Africa, some real players there now, and they just need to all come together in like one nation and off they go, don't they?
Yeah, I think there's more consistent quality. If we go back to the 90s, they had a few massive stars. George Weah, massive star, but he had no help.
No.
Whereas now there are more players who are of world-class quality, because I said George Weah, there weren't many other world-class players from Africa at that time, certainly who were playing for African teams. But now, well, Liverpool had Mane and Salah together. Mahrez winning two league titles.
Yaya Toure is as good as you've seen in centre mid, isn't he? You know.
And then we had Drogba. There's been Drogba's maybe going back a little bit further, but there's been a bigger pool of talent, of higher quality talent. But like I said, they're not necessarily all together. Ivory Coast had a fantastic.
I was just about to say Ivory Coast
of players, but they didn't get it together.
Yeah, that was the one where you saw the squad that had got Toure in it and Drogba in it, and you're going, you know, they should be doing things, and it was a great shame they didn't have, you know, longer runs in some of those tournaments. But one of the things, it's almost like the British Isles, isn't it? You can see parallel examples of like Wales trying to establish themselves as a football nation, develop a player like Giggs, develop a player like Bale, but just can't get Giggs and Bale together at the same time, where they might actually carry the other 9. You know, that's what you're waiting for, isn't it? I don't think we're going to wait too long. Would you agree, Lee? Do you think you'll see an African nation win it in your lifetime? He's still young, by the way, listeners.
Still young. You always want England to kind of win a World Cup, don't we? I probably think there's more chance of an African team winning than thinking. I think you've just said. I think we're so insular here that in Africa, if Morocco would have done it in 2022, then not only would Moroccan people want to emulate what that team's done, an African team, I don't think they've got the dislike of other nations in Africa to not go, well, if we're going to emulate them, even though that's another country. Now we don't want to emulate what Germany. We don't go and say, well, we want to do it. It's not like that. But an African team, I think it needs to take one team to do it, and then the whole continent will try and win it again because Morocco have done it or Ghana did it.
I think that's a really good point, because I think you got that with the South American nations at the start of the World Cups. Uruguay win it, and then clearly Brazil and Argentina were going, well, if they can do it, we must be able to win a World Cup. Would you agree with that, Pete?
Oh, yeah. You see, the other, as soon as one does it, then the other, and it's like there was the psychological barrier of not winning it outside of your own continent. But as soon as one team does, floodgates open, and it doesn't matter anymore.
Do you think that's a factor now, the continent it's played in?
I think it's gone. I think that's gone now.
I'd agree. You agree with that,
that's completely gone. But it certainly was. And it's just the players playing abroad more. I mean, even the Brazil even the great Brazil teams, they weren't all over. They weren't playing all over the place until the 94 team that won it. But prior to that, you still had players like Zico, Socrates. They played in Brazil. Zico didn't move to Europe until he was in his 30s.
No,
it was still prestigious enough for him to play in Brazil, and they could earn enough money relatively to what they would earn in Europe.
Do you think the weather plays a part in these World Cups? The heat?
I think less than it did.
I think
we got around it in Qatar, didn't we? I guess. Be like that in Africa, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think it works. We don't seem to do very well in the heat, but the hot countries seem to do well everywhere else. I think whether that plays a part. I think I agree with you, Peter, that it's it don't matter where it's played now. There's teams that have got the quality and they've played all over. I think that's kind of gone so much now. I think the home advantage is still certainly a thing, but it's whether that's enough like it used to be to get people through. It's not. You still have to have the quality.
Are we scheduled for another African World Cup?
I don't know when the next one would be. I assume
it's quite interesting, isn't it? Because the African nations love the lads that run the game in the world, don't they? Because they were the lads that gave them more places. They never used to have as many places, did they? And that's why the votes to where the World Cup goes are always like cliffhangers these days, aren't they? Yeah. It's quite interesting.
Maybe if there was, I don't know whether you can check, Peter, whether there is one coming up. I'm not sure of the schedule of where.
I think I'm just reading that book, Soccernomics, and one of the great premises in that is that every single nation that hosts a World Cup loses lots of money. Everyone thinks they're going to make millions, or they did. Used to think they were going to make millions out of it, and the opposite is true.
Well, the next World Cup is a triple tournament, which is probably why there's that uncertainty as to we're going. Who is it? It's Canada, Mexico, and the USA.
Blimey.
2030 is, as at this moment, unconfirmed.
But I think what I've just said, that is why loads of countries were like putting their hand up, going, "We'll have it, we'll have it, we'll have it," and then it's starting to dawn on them that you don't actually make lots of money if you host the World Cup. And only I'd expect it would probably come back here.
There is, for 2030, interestingly, 2026, Morocco just missed out on it. They were second in the voting.
There you go.
But for 2030, there is potentially a joint bid between Portugal, Spain, and Morocco.
See, now we're talking, aren't we? Morocco, joint hosts, can get a group of players through.
And Morocco do have a lot of talents dotted around Europe, playing in the Dutch leagues, Belgian leagues. Yeah. Hakim, possibly one of the best right backs in the world, although he does have some off-field issues at the moment in Hakimi. So there is quality.
They had some spirit as well, to be fair, didn't they?
And
when they played,
they showed nous of how to play tournament football, which is probably one of those missing ingredients when you go back to the other teams. Like Ghana maybe didn't show that how to play tournament football side of things.
That's right.
And maybe if they had, they may be the team sitting with a trophy.
Could we call that naivety?
I don't know, because I think for a long time England didn't show how to play tournament football either. So it's just knowledge and expertise more than there was. I think certainly early days with the African teams, naivety is writ large. They have maybe one of the greatest examples of naivety is the free kick in '74, where the Zaire player, when the referee blows his whistle, he sprints out the wall and smashes the ball away.
I watched that live.
There is supposedly a story about why that was deliberate and not naive, but if you're wheeling out an example of footballing naivety, there it is. But I'm not sure I'd go with naivety with the last couple of efforts, or the Ghana effort in 2010, because like England shouldn't be naive, but there they are, or had been unable to play tournament football.
I think that's what I mean. We're talking about African nations, but I think one of the things with England is that you're hopefully starting to see is the kids that had the success in the under-17s that won the World Cup with the under-17s, who are now like 23. Those kids coming through. We just won another tournament last year, didn't we? You know, they're starting to get good at tournament football, and you're hoping that like Foden's lot, when they come through next time, the next World Cup, they'll have that tournament experience and won't be as phased by it as other eras have been.
They don't seem to carry the weight of the shirt, do they, these younger players like Foden and that. They just seem to love playing football. It's not that where I think in the older days when it was the newspapers that everybody was reading and they were dictating people's opinions. Now the social media I think these people aren't bothered about missing a penalty or doing something or getting sent off. It's not like the Beckham issue. So I think the younger ones are playing with far more freedom and enjoying it. Just going back to your point, I think Peter Thornton, I think Morocco might be your one if they can. Do we not think now that systems and managers like De Zerbi showing at Brighton, if you can get a group of talented, technical, intelligent players without superstars, that they could, if they play the right system of football, they could win it. And as Peter Prickett said, there's lots of great Moroccan players playing around now. If they can get the right system going and the right manager and get that, the 2022 is going to help them. You know, I think that might be, and if it's is it 2030 that's going to be
possibly.
Yeah.
Well, Ancelotti said that the way to play at a tournament, and we'll find out if this is what he does because he's due to take over Brazil in the not too distant future. Yeah, that's supposedly the agreement that once he's done at Real Madrid, he will be Brazil manager. Keep it tight, keep it organised, play on the break. Right. That's kind of what Morocco did.
Yeah.
Because you don't have to actually win matches to win a World Cup. Drawing games is enough. Some people might consider winning penalty shootouts winning a match. I think it's winning the shootout rather than winning the game. But Argentina at the last tournament, it was penalties. It was penalties in there in the semi-final. The Dutch.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, as we come towards the end of the podcast, are we saying to the listeners, get your money on an African nation in 2030?
I would. If you're picking one, then Morocco seems to be the head of the bunch with that 2022 experience and hunger. I mean, I don't know how many of the players will be that are on there, but that all gets passed down and that hunger to do it. And they know they would know what ifs if you know, not just them little moments, but what if we'd have done this? What if we'd have done that? So they would be saying to themselves, if only we'd have done that, if only we'd have done this, or we played this way, save this. So experience counts for everything, really. So I think it was close now as we've ever been, but that's going to take another 7 years maybe to try and find that out. Whether I can't see one doing in Canada, America, and South America. You got to favour one of the South American countries there, really.
Yeah.
So yeah, we might have to wait 7 years. I mean, how many years of hurt have we had? So
That's a great point to bring us to the end of the podcast. Brilliantly. Thanks very much.
Thanks for having me, fellas. Appreciate it.
What if the Munich air crash had never happened?
What if Michael Owen had stayed fit?
What if Ajax never sold?
These are just some of the things discussed in a brand new book, Moments that could have changed football forever. Every football fan has a what-if moment that they know would have brought their team glory if things had turned out differently. Every what-if moment in the book has been chosen to spark debate amongst football fans. Buy your copy now online at Amazon or Waterstones and let us know what's your favourite what-if moment in football history.